Hey everyone, welcome into the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. I'm Bobby Sylvester of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at BobbyFantasyPro, and I'm going to be answering your start-sit questions today. Going running back, and then we'll go wide receiver, quarterback, tight end, touching some streaming DST options, and then at the end of the show, I'll be taking your questions and giving answers for about 10 to 15 minutes. If you don't already, you can check out our Fantasy Pros Football Podcast that I host with Mike Tagliere. I'm going to be posting my start-sit rankings on my Twitter, again, at BobbyFantasyPro after this. So if I don't get to your questions, a lot of your questions will be able to be answered just by looking at my start-sit rankings, which, again, are on my Twitter at BobbyFantasyPro. So sorry if I don't get all your questions. Let's start at the running back position. I'll just kind of go down. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about guys like Austin Ekeler, who start every week. Todd Gurley, who, even though his role is diminished, he's still an obvious starter. A couple guys, however, that I am starting. Joe Mixon against Buffalo. Not a great matchup. I understand he hasn't been very good lately. They're passing the ball an absolute ton. But Joe Mixon's been a little bit banged up. He's a worthwhile start. He's a solid RB2 once again this week. David Montgomery against Washington. Yeah, I understand Mike Davis was technically the lead back in week 1, but then they came out. Matt Nagy said, we have to get the ball to David Montgomery more. We saw what happened in week 2. This is very clearly his backfield. You start him against a team like Washington. I've got him as my RB17. Even ahead of guys like Derrick Henry, who goes up against Jacksonville tonight. And I like Derrick Henry in positive game scripts, but we can't always be sure that's going to happen. It probably will tonight against Jacksonville in Gardner Minshew, but because there's some risk there, I would rather start the sure thing in David Montgomery, which feels weird to say at this point. James Conner against San Francisco. Let's keep an eye on his injury. If he is out, Jalen Samuels becomes a must-start. If James Conner plays, James Conner's a high-end RB2. Mark Ingram against Kansas City is a great play. Obviously, they're going to be playing from behind, but Mark Ingram is the primary pass catcher in that backfield. Kerryon Johnson, even against Philadelphia, I think you line him up as a back-end RB2. And granted, this is if you don't have 3 better running backs. Like, say you've got Austin Ekeler, Aaron Jones, and Sony Michelle. Yeah, of course, start those 3, bench Kerryon Johnson. What I'm saying is, for most people, Kerryon Johnson is startable. He's my RB21. James White, Matt Breda. James White goes up against the Jets. This is a very good... I guess for James White, you would prefer for them to be playing from behind, but with Sony Michelle fumbling last week, they might make an example out of him and give James White a lot of touches. Regardless, James White is a safe play, and I think he's got a lot of upside this week. Matt Breda going up against Pittsburgh. I don't love the matchup, but I do love that San Francisco is committed to running the ball. That's Kyle Shanahan's thing. Now, Raheem Mostert did lead this backfield in touches and rushing yards last week, but they were up 30-40 points, so why risk the fragile Matt Breda? This week it's not going to be that case. Matt Breda is the lead back. He's the most talented back in this backfield. He's startable. Now we get to the guys that I've got over here on the right that you can see. These are plays that I'm a little bit more passionate about. Maybe you might not be hearing this elsewhere, that Carlos Hyde is a start, but Carlos Hyde's a great start against the Chargers. I understand that a lot of people are thinking Houston's going to be playing from behind in this game, but just because there's a 55% chance that they lose doesn't mean they're going to be playing from behind so much that they're going to have to pass all game. If you're down 1 or fewer scores, and the spread on this game is 2.5, if you're down 1 or fewer scores, you're still going to run the ball with your primary running back. They showed us last week Carlos Hyde's the primary running back. 20 carries last week, and he's had 2 difficult matchups. The Chargers don't tackle well, so as a result, I've got Carlos Hyde in my top 24, even ahead of Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs is, first of all, he's banged up. He's a little bit game script dependent because they've still got Jalen Rashard, who they're using on third downs, and this is a terrible matchup against Minnesota. You can use Josh Jacobs. I've got him in flex territory as my running back 25, but I would rather play Carlos Hyde against him. Damian Williams is banged up. If he plays, he's an obvious start. If he doesn't play and LaShawn McCoy plays, McCoy's an obvious start. There's a chance both of them don't play. If that's the case, you're going to want to pick up Darwin Thompson. In fact, go pick him up right now, just in case. There's probably a 20-30% chance that he's the starting running back this week, and perhaps even in the future. We know Darwin Thompson is extremely talented. It's a great running offense. Now, I don't love the matchup against Baltimore, but the game script is ideal if Darwin Thompson starts. He is a top 25 running back this week. Somebody else that I've got in my starting range is Raheem Mostert, and this might surprise you a little bit considering I just said Matt Breda is a start also, but they just run the ball so much and so efficiently. They've got a good offensive line. Mostert is talented, and this is going to be a split backfield. Granted, Breda is the starter, but it could be a 60-40 thing, and we've seen a lot of 40% RB2s succeed in fantasy football. I think Mostert would be another example of that. Phillip Lindsey against Green Bay. I don't love the matchup, but the matchup is better for Lindsey than it is for Royce Freeman because Kenny Clark's sitting there in the middle, and Phillip Lindsey is more of the outside back. Now, granted, he does run up the middle as well, but this is a better matchup for Lindsey. You can play him in the flex. And then somebody else that I'm starting, Tags absolutely loves this play this week. In fact, Tags just told me that that's Mike Aguilar that I host the podcast with, if you guys aren't familiar with our podcast. He's really high on Frank Gore this week. He's got him in his top 24. I've got Frank Gore RB30, so a very solid flex play. The reason why, you remember, we just talked about it. Matt Breda, Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson last week combined for 240 rushing yards against this Bengals defense that just can't tackle. And that's who the Buffalo Bills get. Devin Singletary's likely going to be out with a hamstring strain. Josh Allen is going to against Cincinnati, which makes him a very solid play. Some guys kind of on the fringe, you can play them if you need to. Devonta Freeman, I've got him at RB32, and this has a lot more to do with Dirk Cutter than it has to do with Freeman. I think Freeman's still a quality running back, but Dirk Cutter just kills fantasy running back production. Not the best matchup against Indianapolis, although if Leonard is out there, their linebacker, Devonta Freeman is going to move up into the startable range. I'd move him right ahead of Raheem Mostert, and I would expect either Damian Williams or LaShawn McCoy to be out, so that would make Devonta Freeman my RB27. Just keep an eye on my rankings. Again, I'll pin it to my Twitter, at BobbyFantasyPro. I do that every single week, and that updates as the week goes on. Every couple of hours, I make updates as news breaks. Tarik Cohen is a fringe start against Washington. I don't love the game script in this one. Chicago's likely to run away with it, even though Mitch Trubisky's not playing as well. And when that's the case, Tarik Cohen doesn't have as high as a floor, but he still has a nice ceiling. And if the game script does go in his favor, obviously it's going to be a good start. Royce Freeman, I mentioned against Green Bay. I don't want to play him. If you need to, I'd rather play him than someone like Peyton Barber against the Giants, just because I don't want to trust Bruce Arians with the running backs. We've seen him, mix it up 2 consecutive weeks. He's not a bad play. In fact, the most likely scenario is that Peyton Barber finishes in the top 30, but there's a really low floor if they decide Ronald Jones is the starter. So I don't really want to do that. Duke Johnson is in this range as well. Duke Johnson is going up against the Chargers. And as I mentioned, the Chargers are very bad at tackling. They're a lot better against the pass than they are against the run. So I think this is a Carlos Hyde game, not a Duke Johnson game. You can play him just because he has a nice, safe floor, but it's not a great play. Latavius Murray is a wait and see for me. Don't drop him yet. I've been getting a lot of questions about whether or not you should drop Latavius Murray. This is still a very good offensive line. Teddy Bridgewater looked awful, though, so I don't know how much they're going to be on the goal line in the red zone, which is where Latavius Murray really makes his money. Right now, I've got him RB37, so let's just hold off on Murray. I'm also holding off on Adrian Peterson. Horrible matchup against Chicago. Horrible game script against Chicago. So I've got him RB38. You can play him because he's going to get 14, 15 touches, but they're not going to be productive ones. Rex Burkhead is someone that you can pick up if you're desperate. He's probably the top streamer of the week, and what I mean by that is I don't love the play, but if you need to pick someone up, he's your best option unless Frank Gore is available. He goes up against the Jets, 22-point spread in this game, so you would imagine Rex Burkhead is going to be involved. Kenyon Drake is my RB40 against Dallas. I already mentioned Peyton Barber, by the way. I'm not playing Peyton Barber. I've got him RB36 just because I just don't know what they're going to do. Is it going to be Ronald Jones? Is it going to be Peyton Barber? Last week it was Barber. He was only okay. It's a great matchup, but Peyton Barber could get 4 carries, which would absolutely kill you. I'd rather just play Miles Sanders, even against Detroit. I don't love the matchup, and I don't love the committee, but Miles Sanders is significantly better than Peyton Barber too. Again, if you're really desperate and Burkhead and Gore's gone, maybe you're in a much deeper league, you can go with Toni Pollard. He was probably dropped in your league. He's going up against Miami. We've seen these backup running backs in a lot of cases already in the first 2 weeks put up big numbers just because the game gets out of hand. And what are you going to do? You're going to keep running your running back out, your starting running back, and let him get hurt? Or are you going to put in the second stringer? I think Zeke has a great first half, and then they take it easy on him in the second half, and Toni Pollard racks up 12 carries, and those are going to be really useful against Miami. Justice Hill's also on my radar for this week if you want to take a shot in the dark. Now, they haven't used him a ton, but they have used him for 20 routes this season. That's just behind Mark Ingram. They're going to be playing from behind for the first time this season against Kansas City, who is especially vulnerable to pass-catching running backs. So I think Justice Hill could have a big week. Justin Jackson could get in on the touchdown action in Los Angeles since Austin Eckler fumbled on the goal line again. He did in the preseason as well. And Justin Jackson is just flat out the better running back. Now we'll see if he gets the touches to go with it, but again, this is a shot in the dark. Some guys I wouldn't play, Chris Thompson. Yeah, he's got some upside against Chicago on Monday night, but this is a very good defense, and Chris Thompson, even in a good game script last week, didn't really do much. Keep an eye on Darwin Thompson. Let's hold off on Ronald Jones. Don't cut him quite yet. I think he will end up being the starter for the rest of the season in Bruce Arians' offense, which is a good place to be. But for this week, we just don't know, so I wouldn't do it. Let's see here. Jalen Rashard is someone to keep on your radar. If Josh Jacobs doesn't play, Jalen Rashard becomes a must-start even against Minnesota because he's going to get 15 touches, and a lot of those are going to be out of the backfield catching passes. Let's go on over to the wide receiver position. Get your questions in right now, by the way, because we're going to get there in, 10, 12 minutes, and I'll answer as many of them as I possibly can. We'll go to the wide receiver position right now, where the first guy I've got on the list is John Brown. Everybody else ahead of him is duh. Of course you start Mike Williams against Houston. Of course you start Calvin Ridley against Indianapolis in the Dome, Julian Edelman. And then we get to wide receiver 25, which is where I've got John Brown. Now you might not think he's a lock to start every single week. And I understand that. I would start him every week unless you're playing someone like Baltimore, Jacksonville, Buffalo. Just because when John Brown's on the field, he's consistently a wide receiver too. This week against the Cincinnati Bengals, who have a very bad, they just got lit up for 45 points against the San Francisco 49ers. John Brown is very clearly Josh Allen's preferred target, and Josh Allen likes to pass deep more than other quarterbacks. Who's the best deep catcher on his game? Who's the best deep catcher in his wide receiver core? It's John Brown. So I've got him wide receiver 25. Marquise Brown is wide receiver 26. Tags has him a bit higher than this. In fact, our projection model has him in the top 24 as well. He's going up against Kansas City. I was wrong about him last week. I said don't start him just because he only played 14 snaps. And then what did he do? The Ravens gave him 13 targets. So they moved him into the starting lineup. He's their clear number one. They got a great matchup against Kansas City, a great game script. I think you can start Marquise Brown with confidence. Josh Gordon is a start as well. Larry Fitzgerald has been phenomenal. He's a great wide receiver 3 every single week. Not an exception this week against Carolina because they don't have any slot corners. And Larry Fitzgerald is playing the slot pretty much the entire game. Tyler Boyd going up against Buffalo. Now, you might look at Buffalo and say, well, they were the single most difficult defense for opposing wide receivers last year in fantasy. That's true, but they're really bad against the slot. They're great on the outside. Tre'Davious White is one of the best cover corners in the NFL, but Tyler Boyd doesn't play on the outside. That's John Ross. Tre'Davious White will be on John Ross. Tyler Boyd will be in the slot. And remember, Jamison Crowder lit this team up 17 targets in week 1 because they're so good everywhere except the slot. I think that's going to be Tyler Boyd this week, so I would advise starting him even against Buffalo. DJ Moore against Arizona's shoddy secondary is a good play. Curtis Samuel's right there with him as well. Cristian Kirk going up against Carolina, as I just mentioned. They don't have slot cornerbacks that are really any good. Larry Fitzgerald's playing the slot, but so is Cristian Kirk. It's something Cliff Kingsbury's doing. 2 slot wide receivers. They're both good plays. I like Matthew Stafford this week. And he's got Kenny Golladay, and he's also got Marvin Jones. Let's not forget, Marvin Jones was the better receiver before he got hurt last year. And that was when Golden Tate was on the team as well, and Kenny Golladay was the distant third. I think Marvin Jones is not as talented as Kenny Golladay, and obviously Marvin Jones is getting older, but he's still worth starting in a matchup against Philadelphia because they're not going to be able to run the ball at all. DK Metcalfe going up against New Orleans. I don't love the matchup against Lattimore, who's likely going to be shadowing him for most of the game. Now, they do play sides, but Metcalfe lines up on his side more often than not. With that said, he's got 53%. Hold on just a second. I believe on my second tab, I've got DK Metcalfe. Yeah, I do. So I'm skipping ahead. I want to talk about Marquez Valdes-Scantling really quick, who I actually have ahead of DK Metcalfe. Marquez Valdes-Scantling is going up against Denver. Chris Harris has been moved out to the outside. He'll cover Devontae Adams, which leaves Marquez Valdes-Scantling a very juicy matchup. And we know Aaron Rodgers is going to get his, right? Marquez Valdes-Scantling is the clear number 2 in this offense. And if Adams is preoccupied by Chris Harris, it's going to leave for a big day. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, I've got him in my top 35. And I just mentioned DK Metcalfe, who I've got right behind him at number 35 going up against the Saints. This is going to be a high-scoring game. They're going to have to pass a little bit more against the Saints. And then Emmanuel Sanders is my wide receiver 36. Look, I didn't expect it because nobody in the history of football has come back successfully from an Achilles, especially this quick. But Emmanuel Sanders did, so we have to take notice. And he's a great play, even against Green Bay, who has a much improved secondary. I've got Sanders in my top 36, right ahead of guys like Will Fuller, Jarvis Landry. And then we get to a few other plays that might surprise you a little bit. Nelson Aguilar is a very good start this week. I've got him in my top 40. He's a great flex. I just talked to Davis Maddock and Mike Tagliere on the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast doing the DFS show, and they say he's a lock on DraftKings. Well, first of all, he's really cheap, but second of all, Alshon Jeffrey is likely going to be out. They're not going to be able to run the ball against Detroit. Nobody can run the ball against Detroit. So Nelson Aguilar is going to have a big role. Guess he was the top 35 fantasy receiver last year, and he only started half the season. Randall Cobb is in a very similar situation. Michael Gallup is out. Xavier Howard, who is, first of all, one of the top 5 cover corners in the NFL and the only good secondary player remaining on this Dolphins unit, he's going to be shadowing Amari Cooper. That doesn't make Amari Cooper unstartable by any means. I've still got him in my top 20. But what it means is that a lot more of the attention from Dak Prescott is going to go to Randall Cobb, who's starting in Michael Gallup's. Actually, Randall Cobb's going to be playing in the slot. Devin Smith is going to be starting outside, but Randall Cobb is likely going to produce as the number 2 in this offense. Sterling Shepard right now is questionable for the game. I believe he's recovering from, he just cleared concussion protocol. They might still take it easy on him just because you don't want to mess around with these things. And it's the Giants. It's not like they're going to win this year anyway, so why not take it a little bit careful with your wide receiver. But they're going up against Tampa. I understand Tampa's defense has been a lot better since Todd Bowles took over, but it's a good matchup. There's no competition for targets with Golden Tate still out. Evan Ingram is still there. Saquon's going to get his as well, but they're going to have to pass the ball against Tampa Bay to keep up, I would imagine. And most importantly, Daniel Jones has taken over for Eli Manning. You can say what you want about a rookie quarterback, but any rookie quarterback, I'm sorry if you're an Eli Manning honk or whatever, he had a good career. He won 2 Super Bowls, but he's not good anymore. Daniel Jones is a significant upgrade. He looked tremendous in the preseason. He's going to click with these guys. DJ Chark is on the fringe against Tennessee. I think he's the number 1 wide receiver for Gardner Minshew. He gets Tennessee tonight. Not a great matchup. They've got a good secondary, but if you need to play somebody, he's going to get enough of a target share and looks in the red zone that I think you can use him. John Ross against Buffalo. As I mentioned, he's going up against Tre'Davious White. So I would love John Ross most weeks, especially while A.J. Green's out, but this week he's just kind of on the fringe for me with Terry McLaurin, Terry McLaurin's great. He's the wide receiver 1 in Washington. He's on the field for 90% of snaps right now, but he's going up against Chicago. I don't especially want to mess with that. Hardman is going up against Baltimore, and Hardman's going to be one of these guys like Tyreek Hill light that just, he booms some weeks and he misses some weeks. If he's going to miss, it's probably going to be against Baltimore. So I've got Hardman as a low-end wide receiver 4 that you can play in the flex if you're desperate, along with guys like D.D. Westbrook, the number 2, going up tonight against Tennessee. Demarcus Robinson. I've got Hardman ahead of Robinson. It's a better matchup for Hardman, but Robinson's going to be on the field more. I think he's a little bit safer, but if you want to shoot for the moon, I think Hardman is your best bet. Somebody that I'm starting, actually, this is the third consecutive, somebody I'm benching, this is the 3rd straight week I've talked about Robbie Anderson. He's in a horrible matchup once again against New England. He's got Stephon Gilmore. He had Tre'Davious White in week 1, Denzel Ward in week 2. Maybe it was the reverse. I don't really remember. But 3rd straight week. I don't know why we drafted Robbie Anderson because he's got these bad matchups all season long. And this is no exception with Stephon Gilmore. I don't think you can play Robbie Anderson. You can make a case for Tyrell Williams against Minnesota, but it's not a good matchup. Obviously, he's going to get the target share, but Xavier Rhodes is not someone you want to pick on. James White is someone with upside. I'm going to hold off on James White 1 week. Let's watch Mason Rudolph. Let's see how they use James Washington. Did I say James White? I meant James Washington. I think he's going to take over for Dante Moncrief, who's just been terrible. James Washington has a lot of upside. And Mason Rudolph, don't forget, played with James Washington in college. If you're really desperate, let me give you a couple other names. Marquise Goodwin. He can always catch a long touchdown. It happened last week because of blown coverage, but Jimmy Garoppolo does like him quite a bit. They're going to be playing from behind in Miami, and Preston Williams and Devontae Parker are always on the table. Don't play Corey Davis this week. Don't cut him quite yet, but he goes up against Jalen Ramsey. That's an obvious sit. Let's move on over to the tight end position. I only have one guy listed over there. It's Jared Cook. He's a sit. Everybody that I've talked to so far this week agrees. We had Pat Fitzmaurice on for the show, and he's got Jared Cook down as his tight end 18. Tags has him tight end 17. I've got him a little higher at tight end 15, But, I mean, you could pick up Jason. If you've got Jared Cook, you could pick up Jason Witten this week against Miami. Maybe the worst defense against opposing tight ends. I think Jared Cook is likely going to outscore. I think Jason Witten is likely going to outscore Jared Cook. I don't love David Njoku this week against the Rams, and plus he's banged up. So it looks like Demetrius Harris might play. By the way, he is a stud athlete. He's a big old body too, former basketball player. So that's something to watch if David Njoku is out for an extended period of time. Maybe in GPP you can throw Demetrius Harris in there and he gets some points against the Rams. I wouldn't use him this week in redraft leagues, however. My top 12 are very clear. There's a big drop-off after number 12, which is TJ Hawkinson. I don't love the matchup against Philadelphia. They're great against tight ends, but TJ Hawkinson is a playmaker. So I've got him number 12. Delanie Walker, bad matchup against Jacksonville, but you can play him. He's my tight end 11. Vance Mcdonald against San Francisco got in the end zone twice with Mason Rudolph. I don't know if that's going to continue to happen. And San Francisco does have an improved secondary, so this might not be a great start, but that's why I've got him down at number 10. Now the obvious starts: Greg Olson against Arizona, Darren Waller, even against Minnesota because of his target share. Austin Hooper hasn't been great in the first 2 weeks, but he has 15 targets. He had 85 targets last season, so he's my tight end 7 in the Dome against Indianapolis. And then O.J. Howard. I've been getting a lot of questions about him. Should I drop him? Can I really start him this week? We just don't know. You got to start him against the Giants. He's my tight end 6. In fact, that's where he is in ECR as well. If you look at ECR, it's the expert consensus rankings. So 100-plus analysts around the industry, we mash their rankings together and say, this is what the industry as a whole thinks. They've got O.J. Howard in their top 6 tight ends still, guys. It's a great matchup. I would not bench him. Mark Andrews is a great play against Kansas City. Then obviously the big 4 tight ends. Now let's go to the quarterback position. And the first player I wanted to talk about here was Kyler Murray. By the way, I'm going to take a pause really quick. If you're enjoying the show, please just let my bosses know that, you want more of this content by just hitting the like button. It takes 2 seconds to do. And by the way, Tags has a streaming show every Sunday morning right before games start. He's going to do it for an hour, update you on all the breaking news about who's playing, who's not playing, all of this information. And then he's going to be taking your Q&A for, about 45 minutes. So if you don't want to miss out on that show, and Tags and I also do a waiver wire show on Tuesday at the same time as this one, 1 o'clock Eastern time, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future content. We really appreciate it as well. We're trying to grow our channel. It's kind of a newer thing. I think we started maybe 14 months ago, so trying to get our legs under us a little bit. All right, quarterback position, obvious starts: Dak Prescott, Lamar Jackson, Tom Brady against the Jets, Deshaun Watson against the Chargers. And then this is where it might surprise some people. I've got Josh Allen as my number 6 quarterback this week. I already talked about Cincinnati. Can't tackle, can't defend the run. They're using Josh Allen kind of as a running back. They're moving Frank Gore out as a fullback ahead of Josh Allen. He's going to get 10, 15 carries against Cincinnati. Plus, he passes the ball. And Cincinnati doesn't have a good secondary. Josh Allen has some weapons now with John Brown. He's still got Zay Jones that he passes to. Dawson Knox looks like a quality rookie tight end. And so I've got him in my top 6. Everyone else I've talked to in the industry has him locked into their top 10 as well. If you need a streamer, it's Josh Allen this week. Matt Ryan against Indianapolis is a good play in that dome, as I mentioned. Russell Wilson against the Saints. The Saints are great against the run. They are not great in the secondary. And I think Russell Wilson has a big game, even if he only passes the ball 20 times, as we've seen before. And then we get to Kyler Murray. I know what you're thinking. Kyler Murray has not been that great. His touchdown rate hasn't been good, but he's got the second most passing yards in NFL history for his first 2 starts. That's really good. He's thrown the ball 94 times. He's got 4 wide receivers on 70% of plays. Cliff Kingsbury has this guy passing a ton, and we haven't seen him run yet. And the reason why is because he went up against Detroit, who locks down run-happy quarterbacks. And Baltimore, who's everyone knows is a top 5 defense in the NFL. This week he gets Carolina, another matchup that's not as good, but it's much better than the first 2. So I've got him in my top 10. In fact, I'm using him in cash games in DFS this week. You'll hear that on the DFS show that's coming out here. It should be this evening. Aaron Rodgers is still in my top 10, even against Denver. Carson Wentz against Detroit. They're going to have to pass the ball. They won't be able to run against Detroit. So Carson Wentz, even without Alshon Jeffrey, he's going to feast. Jameis Winston, I understand a lot of you guys want to drop him, but he's still got those 3 really quality. Everyone loves Mike Evans. He's still a top 15 wide receiver. Everyone loves Chris Godwin. A lot of people moved him into their top 10. O.J. Howard's going to be fine, guys. He's got these weapons. Everyone was playing sick in week 1. Then they had 4 days off. He's going to be fine. We've seen Jameis Winston have bad stretches, and then he bounces back. This is maybe the easiest matchup for an opposing quarterback. So if you're not going to play Jameis Winston, you might as well cut him now. I would advise playing him, though, even over guys like Baker Mayfield, Jared Goff. These guys aren't bad plays, but I would rather play Jameis Winston. And if you're really desperate and you can't pick up Josh Allen, Matthew Stafford's probably available to you. They're going to have to pass the ball. They can't run the ball against Philadelphia. They're going to be playing from behind. This is a good situation for Matthew Stafford, who does have some playmakers. Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, TJ Hawkinson. Jimmy Garoppolo, 16. Phillip Rivers, 17 against Houston. Kirk Cousins is not a bad play against Oakland. I've got him at 18. And then a two-quarterback special. I think Mason Rudolph is a start this week against San Francisco. He's got some weapons with Juju Smith-Schuster. And I believe that Mason Rudolph is better at this stage in Big Ben's career than Big Ben. I would start Mason Rudolph because they're going to pass the ball a ton. That's just what they did last year, 675 attempts. If Mason Rudolph even gets to 80% of that, which is a huge drop-off, he's still going to be in the top half of the league in pass attempts. Cam Newton is a sit this week, by the way, against Arizona. It looks like he's probably not going to play. He didn't even practice yesterday, which is a bad sign. Daniel Jones, I don't think you need to pick him up in 1 QB leagues, but for 2 QB leagues, I think you can play him against Tampa. Good matchup, huge upgrade over Eli Manning. And he's got some weapons, Saquon Barkley, Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard if he plays. Now let's go DST really quick before I get to the Q&A. And it looks like I'll have about 10, maybe 15 minutes to take some Q&A. So get your questions in. If you haven't already, I'll get to as many of them as I can here in just a moment. Patriots and Cowboys are by far the 1 and 2. And then it gets to Chicago Bears against Washington, Minnesota against Oakland. Those are great plays, obviously. Buffalo against Andy Dalton. They're going to be playing from ahead, blitzing the quarterback, horrible offensive line. Andy Dalton's going to have to pass the ball 40, 45 times, which will lead to multiple interceptions likely and several sacks as well. Jacksonville Jaguars, you can play them tonight. I've got them as a start, DST number 6. I know they weren't great in the first 2 weeks. They were pretty good last week against Houston, 4 sacks, 13 points allowed. Now, granted, they didn't force any turnovers, but turnovers are a very volatile stat. So I don't think you can rely on that as predictive for moving on the rest of the season. They've got only 4 fantasy points through 2 weeks, but they're good play against Marcus Mariota. Taylor Wano is still out. And again, short weeks are better for DST. So I've got the Jags number 6. The Packers are, again, 3rd straight week. My streamer of the week, I've got them DST 7. Most improved DST in the NFL this offseason. They added Zadarius Smith. They added Preston Smith, Adrian Amos, Darnell Savage. They drafted another quality defensive lineman as well. They're a great defense, and they get Joe Flacco. The offensive line's pretty good in Denver, at least as far as I'm concerned. They're really good at run blocking. They're not very good at pass blocking, so I think they'll be able to get to Joe Flacco. Seattle Seahawks against New Orleans. Now, typically you'd look at New Orleans and you'd say, no way am I playing the Seattle Seahawks against them, but Teddy Bridgewater's there now, and he looked awful last week. In fact, Tags thinks Taysom Hill might take over in the second half if it goes poorly for Teddy Bridgewater. And New Orleans, we thought they had such a good offensive line because no one ever got to Drew Brees. Maybe it's because they never wanted to rush Drew Brees because he just picks apart the blitz. That wasn't the case last week against Teddy Bridgewater. He was horrible under pressure, so I think you can play the Seahawks. Others you can play Tennessee tonight against Gardner Minshew in Jacksonville. The Chargers against Houston. Yeah, they're going to put up points with Deshaun Watson, but again, their offensive line is pretty bad, so they're going to get to the passer. So they're going to get to Deshaun Watson for multiple sacks. You can count on that, especially with Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram, right? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I would have laughed if you would have told me I'd be saying the Buccaneers are startable any week this year if you would have told me that in the preseason. But, Todd Bowles has them rolling right now. They're going up against the rookie quarterback, bad offensive line with the Jets. So I've got the Bucs in my top 12, along with the San Francisco 49ers rounding it out against Mason Rudolph. Some that I'm not playing. You can play the Rams against Cleveland. You can play the Eagles against Detroit. I don't really want to. I would advise not playing the Cleveland Browns, however, against the Rams, Houston Texans against the Chargers, and then the New Orleans Saints against Seattle. Let's throw the Ravens in there as well. They're owned in 95% of leagues. Obviously, don't play them against the Kansas City Chiefs. Okay, guys, let's take some Q&A. Man, it looks like my picture's a little blurry right now. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not sure why that is going on. Okay, let me scroll up to the top here. This week, half PPR. We've got Cooper Kupp or Cristian Kirk. Let me pull it up really quick. I've got Kupp wide receiver 15. I've got Kirk down at wide receiver 32. So for me, it's definitely Cooper Kupp, Kyle. Nelson Aguilar or Matt Breda in flex standard. It's Breda, and it's really not close. Carlos, you've got Tom Brady and Matt Ryan this week. Those are two good options, but for me, it is Tom Brady. I've got him QB4 and Matt Ryan QB7. Randall Cobb in the flex for PPR versus Miles Sanders. This is a close one. I'm going with Randall Cobb. Marissa wants to know Nelson Aguilar or Josh Gordon. I like Aguilar, but it's definitely Gordon this week. Jonas says Mike Williams or Curtis Samuel, full PPR. I like them both this week, but it's Mike Williams by 8 or 9 spots. Would you start Matt Breda or Mostert? I would start Breda. I would start them both, but if I have to choose between the two, Karen, it's Breda. The reason that Mostert got more carries is because the game was out of hand, and Breda is, he's been proven fragile in the past, so why keep running him out there for 20 touches? Just let the second and third string backs get that work. You just traded for Mixon for Sony Michelle. It looks like there was a typo in there. Is that a good move? I would rather have Sony Michelle rest this season, but it's really close, so it's not bad. All right, 2 out of 3. Marvin Jones, John Ross, Deebo Samuel. I'm benching Samuel of that group, Pedro. Greg wants to know half PPR. O.J. Howard, Darren Waller. For me, this really just comes down to the matchup. O.J. Howard goes up against the Giants, Darren Waller against Minnesota, so I'm taking O.J. Howard on that one. Flex PPR, you need Chark, Latavius Murray, or Malcolm Brown. These are all really close, Blair. Of these three, I'm going to go with, DJ Chark. It's because it's PPR. If it was half, I would probably lean Latavius Murray. Will says I need to pick 2 here between Josh Gordon, Allen Robinson, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and Curtis Samuel. All these are really close, so this is a great question. But for me, it's Josh Gordon and Allen Robinson. All right, should I drop Mostert for Chark? Danny, I would do that. Michael wants to know Oakland off. That's not a question. All right, Josh Jacobs or Cooper Kupp or David Montgomery. I'm going Cooper Kupp regardless, but it looks like Josh Jacobs might be missing this game. But it's definitely Cooper Kupp for me. Would you trade Josh Jacobs for Antonio Brown? I would stop listening to this right now and go accept that trade before it gets pulled off the table. Ross says Miles Sanders or Randall Cobb this week. I think I already answered that one. Josh Allen or Deshaun Watson this week. Let's see here. I've got Josh Allen number 6. I believe I've got Deshaun Watson 1 spot higher against the Chargers, number 5. All right, let's see here. T.Y. Hilton, DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, or Hardman. I would not take it. Hardman's not a bad play against Baltimore, but I would not start him over any of those 3, Jacob. Is Golden Tate worth picking up? I'm really glad you asked. Golden Tate is one of my favorite pickups this week. He was on pace, guys, for 1,192 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns, 101 receptions before he got traded last year. We've seen wide receivers get traded midseason. You have to learn with the quarterback. You have to learn the playbook. And they weren't using him because it's Doug Peterson, and he just screws fantasy wide receivers and running backs so much because he mixes and matches the snap counts. Golden Tate was playing like 50% of the snaps. When he's on the field, he's extremely efficient. 5 straight seasons with 90 receptions. 4 out of 5 seasons with 1,000 receiving yards. That's who Golden Tate is, and now he gets the upgrade with Daniel Jones. He's not battling for targets with Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones. I think this is a good situation. Golden Tate is a wide receiver 3 most weeks, and I would absolutely pick him up. He's one of my favorites this week, actually. Mostert or Cohen this week? I've got Mostert just ahead of Cohen. Mostert or Hardman? I'm going with Hardman. You know what? Standard scoring, I'm going to go with Mostert. All right, let's see here. David Montgomery, Damian Williams, or Brandon Cooks in the flex spot. Man, either this is a shallow league or your team is stacked. I'm going with Brandon Cooks here. All right, Josh Jacobs, Cup. I already answered that one. Let's see here. A lot of repeat questions. Guys, I'm going to get to your... I'm going in order here, so if you ask your question, I'm going to get to it. Repeat questions, just slow things down here. Brandon Cooks, John Brown, Cristian Kirk need 2. It's definitely Cooks. After that, between Kirk and Brown, I'm going with Brown, but it's closer. Darren Waller or O.J. Howard. For me, it's. I already answered that one. It's O.J. Howard. Miles Sanders or I already answered that one. Gardner Minshew or Mason Rudolph in Dynasty. For me, it's Mason Rudolph. Look, I'm a Jags fan. Gardner Minshew is a lot of fun to root for. He's going to get some fantasy points on the ground. I don't think he's the long-term solution in Jacksonville, however. Nick Foles is going to come back. He's going to be the starter this year and next year. And then I think they're going to look for a quarterback in the draft. Gardner Minshew, he could impress and earn himself the job. But Mason Rudolph, we know he's the starter moving forward. They traded Joshua Dobbs because they trust Mason Rudolph, and for good reason. He's a really talented quarterback. He was my favorite quarterback in that draft class 2 years ago. And that might have been pushing it a little bit, but he looked really good in week 2. He reminded me actually of a young Big Ben. And Big Ben at this stage in his career wasn't great, but he passed the ball 675 times, so he's the fantasy quarterback 2 last season. Mason Rudolph is going to throw the ball a ton. He's got good weapons. I would love to have him in Dynasty. In fact, I just dropped him in my Dynasty League 2 months ago, and I'm kicking myself big time. All right, guys, let's take 5 or 10 more questions. Edelman, Moore, or Cristian Kirk. For me, it's Edelman this week. If you have to pick a second one of the group, it is DJ Moore over Kirk. Should I drop Michael Gallup? Kyle, this is a great question. It depends on who you'd be picking up. I think you were the one that asked just a moment ago if you should pick up Golden Tate. I would drop Michael Gallup for Golden Tate. If there's not somebody like Golden Tate out there, I would try to hang on to Michael Gallup because I think he's going to be good when he comes back. But who knows? You might be able to drop him and then pick him back up in 2 weeks. All right, let's see. Curtis Samuel, Josh Gordon, Tyrell Williams, Josh Jacobs, flex. So you need one of these. That's a lot of good options. This is 1 point PPR. If it was standard, I'd go Josh Jacobs if he played. But because it's PPR, I'm going with Josh Gordon just ahead of Curtis Samuel. Should I trade Josh Gordon and Austin Eckler? Okay, so let's see. For Gurley and John Brown, no, I would not do that, and not especially close. Let's see here. Marcus Mariota, Teddy Bridgewater, Mason Rudolph, or Kyle Allen. Max, I really hope for your sake this is a super flex or 2 quarterback league. I've got Mason Rudolph the highest, but let me tell you my rankings since I didn't go that deep at quarterback. This is for a lot of you 2 quarterbackers out there. I know there's a lot of you guys. I've got Mason Rudolph 19 this week. Let's see, who else did you have here? Bridgewater, I've got 25. Kyle Allen, I've got 33. That's going to move up, obviously, if he's playing over Cam Newton. And then Marcus Mariota, I've got 28 against Jacksonville. So Mason Rudolph it is. All right, and guys, I'm sorry if I missed some of your questions. Sometimes I'm scrolling through these and I accidentally skip over it. Nothing personal. Ask it again on Twitter at BobbyFantasyPro. I get to as many of them as I possibly can over there. And again, if I don't get to your questions, I'm going to be on Twitter at BobbyFantasyPro posting my rankings here in about 20 minutes after I do this podcast. I'm going to do my rankings article, which is already written up. I just need to update my rankings and then publish it, and then I'm going to go eat some lunch. So I'll pin that to my Twitter. I do it every single week at BobbyFantasyPro. If you've got more questions, let's take 5 more of them right here. Sony Michelle or Josh Jacobs going forward? I'd prefer Sony Michelle. Start 3. Actually, we already did that one. Miles Sanders or Randall Cobb? I already did that one as well. That one was asked like 6 times. Man, holy cow. Brandon Cooks, John Brown or Cristian Kirk? You need 2. I already answered that one as well. Lots of repeat questions. Sorry, guys, for those of you listening, waiting for your questions to be answered. Trying to skip along here. Baker or Winston this week? I'm going with Winston barely over Baker. Don't drop Baker. I like him rest of the season. Don't panic on him. He had 2 not so good matchups, and he still passed for well over 600 yards, 8 yards per attempt. He's just been throwing interceptions. He's going to be fine. He's got some good weapons as well. Sammy Watkins or Chris Godwin? I'm going with Sammy Watkins this week. PPR, Matt Ryan or Josh Allen? I've got Josh Allen 1 spot ahead of him. All right, let's take 2 more. Chris Godwin or Robert Woods? That's a good situation to be in. Let me get my rankings because I'm not exactly sure. I haven't really talked about these guys this week just because they're both starts, but must be a more shallow league. I've got Chris Godwin, wide receiver 10 against the Giants, and I've got Robert Woods, wide receiver 16 against Cleveland. And the last one, Aaron Jones or Chris Carson? I've got Aaron Jones as my running back 9, Chris Carson as my running back 11, just because the Saints are so good against the run. Chris Carson did fumble again last week, which makes me a little bit nervous. He's probably safer than Aaron Jones, but I think Aaron Jones has more upside this week against Denver. Guys, again, if you don't mind, hit that like button if you enjoyed the show. It does really help us out. And remember, Tags has his live stream Sunday morning. Hold on a second. Tags has his live stream Sunday morning at, I believe it is 12 o'clock Eastern. Maybe it's 11 o'clock Eastern. Hit the subscribe button if you don't want to miss out on that content. We do 3 live streams a week, several videos as well. Our video guy, Chris, is doing an awesome job, just killing it. Hope you guys are enjoying this. Thanks for watching, and enjoy your football.